Imagine waking up one morning and realizing the world still looks the same, but something invisible has shifted. The air around you has thickened, sound feels distant, and even the light seems muffled, as if you're watching life through glass. That is the world of The Bell Jar, a novel that does not simply tell a story of breakdown, but lets you breathe the same trapped air as its heroine. Written by the poet Sylvia Plath and first published in 1963, The Bell Jar remains one of the most haunting and intimate works in modern literature. Plath, already famous for her fierce and crystalline poetry, wrote this novel during the final, most turbulent years of her life. Though she never lived to see its lasting fame, her single novel would secure her place among the literary immortals. Today, The Bell Jar is studied in universities worldwide, included in countless 100 greatest novels lists, and celebrated for its lyrical honesty about mental illness, gender, and the suffocating expectations of post-war America. Plath herself was a prodigy, winner of the Yale Younger Poets Prize for her first collection, The Colossus, a Fulbright scholar at Cambridge, and one of the few poets whose name has become a symbol of both brilliance and fragility. She once described writing as a way of ordering the chaos. In The Bell Jar, that chaos takes the form of Esther Greenwood, a young woman whose bright mind turns against her in a world that refuses to understand it. Let me read you one line that captures the whole mood of the book. I felt very still and very empty, the way the eye of a tornado must feel, moving dully along in the middle of the surrounding hullabaloo. That sentence alone is a small miracle, calm in tone, devastating in meaning, the eye of the storm that was Plath herself. So, in today's essay on Echoes of Books, we're not just opening a novel, we're opening a jar that has held generations of readers captive. If you find solace in stories that dare to look straight into the heart of despair and still find poetry there, remember to like this video, subscribe to Echoes of Books, and if you wish, support the channel so that we can keep bringing forgotten pages back to life. The Descent and the Flicker. The story begins with a bright, summer sky over New York City, the kind of sky that makes everyone else feel alive. But Esther Greenwood, our 20-year-old narrator, feels only a hollow stillness. She's an honors student from Massachusetts, a scholarship girl, intelligent, witty, and ambitious. On paper, she's the kind of young woman America in the 1950s was supposed to celebrate. Clean, polite, ready to succeed. In reality, she's already slipping through the cracks. Esther has won a guest editorship at Ladies' Day, a glamorous magazine modeled on Mademoiselle, where Sylvia Plath herself once worked. For a few weeks, she lives in a hotel filled with other brilliant young women, all wearing new dresses, all pretending not to be terrified. They attend parties, pose for photographers, and eat fancy lunches. To everyone else, it looks like the beginning of a dream. To Esther, it feels like someone else's life. She looks around the dinner table and thinks, I couldn't help wondering what awful thing it was that I had done. The more she tries to perform happiness, the further she drifts from it. Her friend Doreen, wild and cynical, goes out drinking with a smooth-talking DJ. Betsy, sweet and wholesome, represents the obedient path, church, smiles, security. Esther feels caught between them, unable to choose, like she's standing at the fork of a road that splits endlessly. She observes everyone around her, but she no longer knows who she's supposed to be. When she returns home to her suburban house, the silence of the walls becomes unbearable. Her mother, well-meaning but clueless, tells her to cheer up and learn shorthand so she can get a good job. Esther feels her identity shrinking. She can't write, can't sleep, can't even read the books she once loved. The life that once seemed open now feels sealed. She says, "The trouble was, I had been inadequate all along. I simply hadn't thought about it." One summer night, after a series of failed attempts to escape herself, she hides in the basement and swallows a bottle of sleeping pills. The world goes dark, then silent. When she wakes, she's in a hospital, her body rescued but her mind fractured. The chapters that follow are both terrifying and tender. We move through the sterile corridors of psychiatric wards, through the cold precision of 1950s medicine, where doctors measure emotion in voltage. Her treatments are brutal. In one of the most famous scenes, Esther undergoes electroconvulsive therapy from Dr. Gordon, a handsome, distracted man who treats her like an experiment. The shock leaves her screaming and humiliated. "I wondered what terrible thing it was I had done," she thinks again, echoing the line from earlier, as if the world is punishing her for asking questions it doesn't want to hear. Later, after another suicide attempt, she's moved to a private hospital where the tone changes. Here she meets Dr. Nolan, a woman psychiatrist who finally speaks to her like a human being. For the first time, kindness enters the story. "Dr. Guinness." Nolan listens. She doesn't promise miracles. She tells Esther, "I suppose you'll get used to it," referring to life itself. That simple honesty becomes a turning point. As the months pass, Esther learns to breathe again, slowly, tentatively. The rhythm of the novel changes too. The sentences begin to soften. The metaphors turn inward. She befriends Joan, another patient whose life mirrors hers in eerie ways. Brilliant, pressured, desperate to fit into a world that refuses to fit her. Their friendship ends in tragedy when Joan takes her own life. Esther's survival feels almost accidental, and that's what makes it real. By the final pages, Esther prepares to meet a panel of doctors who will decide if she's ready to leave the hospital. She dresses carefully, as if stepping into a new skin. The bell jar hasn't shattered. It's simply been lifted, for now. She walks toward the interview room, whispering to herself. I took a deep breath and listened to the old brag of my heart. I am. The story ends not with triumph, but with breath, a fragile, human sound. The bell jar is, in essence, a descent into the underworld of one woman's mind and a slow climb back toward the surface. But Plath makes it more than personal. The story becomes a mirror of an entire generation of women who were told to smile while suffocating. Now that we've traveled through Esther's journey, we can look closer at what lies beneath the glass. How does Plath build that suffocating atmosphere? What cultural and philosophical questions are hiding inside it? The structure of suffocation. One of the most remarkable things about the bell jar is how its structure itself feels alive, like a lung expanding and collapsing. Sylvia Plath didn't just write about depression. She built its rhythm into the shape of the story. The book begins with speed and brightness, the pulse of New York, the noise of ambition, then gradually contracts until every page feels like a whisper trapped inside glass. You can feel the walls closing in, line by line. When we open the novel, Esther's life looks linear, promising, well-organized. A girl goes to the city, works at a magazine, plans a future. But halfway through, time loses direction. The chapters begin to slip out of sequence. Memory fragments replace action. Days blur together, and sentences grow short, almost breathless. You can sense the shift before you even realize it. The structure becomes claustrophobic because the narrator's world is closing around her. Plath understood that the reader's body could be made to feel what the character feels. She does it through rhythm. Early scenes flow with long, descriptive sentences filled with sensory detail, bright colors, laughter, lipstick, heat. Later, when Esther's mind starts to fracture, the prose tightens. Sentences shorten, repetition creeps in, and punctuation becomes erratic. Plath once said that she wanted to write the real thing, to write the blood. In this novel, even the syntax bleeds. There's a subtle use of contrast throughout: motion versus stillness, noise versus silence, clarity versus fog. When Esther is in New York, the narrative feels cinematic: crowds, neon lights, cocktails, elevators. But when she returns home, the tempo stops. She lies in bed for days, staring at the ceiling. The writing turns from film to photograph. "The day I came back," she says, "I felt myself shrinking inside the clothes I had bought. That shrinking becomes the novel's pulse, a visual of self-erasure." Plath's choice of first-person perspective deepens this suffocation. We see everything through Esther's eyes, but as her perception distorts, so does ours. It's not that the world outside changes, it's that we're trapped within her consciousness, unable to step out for air. That's why the bell jar feels so intimate it's almost uncomfortable. The voice pulls us in, and once we're inside, we're sealed there with her. Even the title works structurally. The bell jar isn't introduced immediately. It appears midway through, right when the narrative collapses inward. Before that, we've been reading a conventional coming-of-age story. After that point, the bell jar becomes the governing metaphor. It's not just a symbol, it's an architecture. Everything under it is distorted: time, sound, thought. The bell jar gives the novel its invisible form. Plath manipulates this structure to mirror the psychological process of depression, not an explosion, but a slow implosion. Notice how the plot avoids dramatic turning points. There's no single moment when Esther goes mad. Instead, she drifts from city to suburb, from conversation to silence, until the line between thought and reality blurs. That's what makes the book unsettling. The descent is so smooth it feels natural. Even recovery follows the same rhythm. There's no cathartic breakthrough, no Hollywood cure. When Esther begins to improve, the narrative expands again, just slightly. Paragraphs breathe longer. Dialogue returns. But the pacing never returns to what it was before. It's like lungs scarred by smoke. They work, but differently. The structure reminds us that healing is not a return to who you were, but the start of someone else you haven't met yet. Critics often point out how Plath's sense of composition reflects her poetic training. She had an ear for tempo and silence, the music of the unsaid. You can feel it when she moves from vivid detail. The silver-white moon hung in the black sky like a patient etherized, to flat description, "I couldn't sleep." The contrast stings because it feels earned. Each change in rhythm marks a new emotional temperature. Structurally, the novel can be divided into 3 movements. The first is outward motion, life under pressure, ambition, curiosity. The second is inward collapse, the bell jar lowering, the slow suffocation of meaning. The third is suspended resolution, a fragile stillness, like a glass that could break or stay whole. Together, they form what you might call a psychological sonata. And this musical structure is what keeps the bell jar from being simply autobiographical. It becomes universal because we recognize the rhythm, the alternation between clarity and confusion, order and chaos that belongs to any human struggle. The novel invites empathy not through events, but through the shape of its breathing. So when you read The Bell Jar, don't just follow the plot. Listen to the rhythm. The pacing itself tells you where Esther is in her journey, expanding when she hopes, contracting when she then doubts, falling silent when words fail. The form and the feeling are one. That is Plath's genius. She doesn't describe suffocation. She makes you feel it. The gendered cage. When Sylvia Plath wrote The Bell Jar, she wasn't only writing about her mind, she was writing about her century. The 1950s were polished, polite, and painfully small. The war had ended, soldiers had returned home, and the world wanted everything neat again. Neat houses, neat families, neat women. And within that picture-perfect frame, women like Esther Greenwood were supposed to smile forever. Esther's breakdown doesn't come out of nowhere. It's born from a slow, social suffocation, the weight of expectation pressing on her every breath. She's told she can be brilliant, but only if her brilliance behaves. She can study literature, but not forget to learn shorthand, because one day she'll need to help a husband. Every adult woman around her performs this role with mechanical grace. Esther looks at them, mothers, secretaries, beauty queens, and senses that all the roads ahead lead to the same small room. There's a scene early in the novel that captures this perfectly. Esther's boss, J.C., is smart and ambitious, a woman who has climbed high in a man's world. Yet when Esther looks at her, she doesn't see liberation. She sees exhaustion. J.C. wanted to educate me, she says, but she scared me stiff. It's the kind of admiration tinged with dread, the realization that success in such a system demands the slow erasure of self. Buddy Willard, Esther's on and off boyfriend, represents another version of the cage, this time gilded in logic and reason. Buddy is handsome, courteous, and absolutely certain that his worldview is correct. He studies medicine, he dissects cadavers, and he believes that understanding anatomy means understanding life. When Esther visits him at the hospital, he shows her a woman giving birth. He tells her, "This is what you'll see one day." The moment is supposed to be educational, but it feels like a prophecy, a reduction of her entire future to a biological destiny. Esther recoils not at the sight, but at the assumption. Plath draws this tension with surgical precision. She doesn't shout feminist slogans. She simply shows the absurdity of a world where intelligence in a woman is treated as a liability. Esther's choice is narrow, not because she lacks talent, but because talent itself becomes threatening when worn by a woman. The men in her life, doctors, teachers, lovers, each hold a small instrument of control. Some wield authority, others wield charm. The effect is the same. She becomes an object in other people's narratives. There's also the maternal cage, the tender one, the one that smiles. Esther's mother is well-meaning, but trapped inside her own obedience. She believes in safety above all. When Esther refuses to marry, her mother begs, "You'll be sorry one day." When she fails to type or sleep, her mother says, "You'll feel better if you try." Each line sounds harmless, but together they form a chorus of quiet coercion. The problem is not malice. It's the inherited fear of what happens when a woman steps out of line. In 1950s America, psychiatry itself was often another arm of patriarchy. Mental illness was seen not as resistance, but as malfunction. A woman who questioned her role could easily be labeled unstable. In that context, Esther's descent into hospitalization becomes political. Her madness isn't just psychological, it's cultural rebellion. She stops fitting the mold, so society locks her away until she can behave again. This is why Dr. E. Nolan's arrival feels so revolutionary. A woman doctor, calm and direct, she treats Esther as an equal. For the first time, someone listens without judging, diagnoses without dominating. In that small act, Plath sketches a new kind of relationship, one based not on authority, but on empathy. Doctor? Nolan doesn't fix Esther. She gives her permission to exist. Plath's own life reflected this double bind. She had been a scholarship student, a wife, a mother, and an artist, all roles that demanded full devotion, each pulling against the others. She once wrote in her journal that she felt like a circus tightrope walker juggling a dozen eggs. Every success came with a new fear of being too much, of not being enough. The Bell Jar captures that exhaustion perfectly. And yet, despite its pain, the novel also contains moments of fierce clarity. Esther doesn't hate being a woman. She hates being told what a woman must be. Her desire is not for chaos, but for choice. That's why the famous fig tree dream resonates so deeply. She imagines herself sitting under a fig tree, each branch holding a possible life: writer, professor, lover, mother, traveler. But as she hesitates, the figs shrivel and fall. "I wanted each and every one of them," she says. But choosing one meant losing all the rest. The tragedy isn't indecision. It's the cruel economy of womanhood that demands she choose only one. By the time we reach the end of the Bell Jar, we realize that Esther's illness is not just an individual story. It's the anatomy of an era. She's the canary in the cultural mine, gasping first in a world that still lacks oxygen for women who think and feel too much. That's why the novel continues to speak to new generations. When young readers today say they see themselves in Esther, they're not simply identifying with depression. They're recognizing the lingering gendered pressures that still shape identity: to succeed gracefully, to suffer quietly, to appear perfect while slowly unraveling inside. The Bell Jar, then, is not only a metaphor for the mind, it's a social artifact, transparent but airtight, built by decades of polite expectations. And Plath, through Esther, teaches us that even invisible prisons can suffocate the loudest hearts. The world outside Esther's glass dome was changing too. Philosophy, politics, the birth of new ideas about freedom and meaning. Beneath the surface of her story lies a deeper question. What happens when the search for authenticity meets a world built on imitation? The existential breath. If the first half of the Bell Jar shows us the world closing in, this part of the story asks what happens when meaning itself dissolves. Beneath the feminist lens runs a deeper current, a quiet, philosophical despair that links Plath to the great existential thinkers of her time. The novel isn't just about one woman's breakdown, it's about what it means to exist when every definition of self begins to crumble. Esther Greenwood's experience echoes the language of existentialism, that strange, post-war philosophy that tried to make sense of freedom in a world that had seen too much horror. Jean-Paul Sartre wrote that existence precedes essence, meaning that we're born without purpose and must invent one. Camus wrote of the myth of Sisyphus, arguing that life's absurdity must be faced without illusion. Plath never called herself an existentialist, but her novel hums in that same key. Esther's depression is more than a medical condition. It's the terror of being conscious in a meaningless world. She says, "I felt very still and very empty, the way the eye of a tornado must feel." That line doesn't only describe sadness, it captures the dizziness of awareness, the mind recognizing its own fragility. To be awake in the Bell Jar is to be exposed. There's a striking moment when Esther visits the beach with a friend. She looks at the water, calm and endless, and imagines simply walking into it, letting it close over her head. It's a moment of philosophical temptation. not death as punishment, but as silence. It recalls Camus' opening line, "There is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide." For Camus, to live despite the absurd is an act of rebellion. For Esther, survival is less rebellion than curiosity, a fragile, almost accidental instinct to see what happens next. Plath's gift is to make that philosophical tension emotional. The fig tree dream, which we touched on earlier, is more than a metaphor for choice. It's an existential parable. Each fig represents a possible meaning, a possible self. But because she cannot choose without regret, she chooses nothing. "I saw myself sitting in the crotch of this fig tree," she says, "starving to death, just because I couldn't make up my mind which of the figs I would choose." The paralysis is pure Sartre, freedom turning to nausea when faced with infinite possibility. And yet, the bell jar refuses pure nihilism. Plath doesn't glorify despair. Her insight is subtler. Meaninglessness isn't a void. It's a condition we live inside, like air. Esther doesn't conquer it. She learns to breathe within it. That's why the final line, "I am, I am, I am," feels so powerful. It isn't triumph. It's existence stripped to its barest truth, a heartbeat, a pulse, the smallest proof that being alive still counts for something. In this sense, the bell jar belongs beside the existential literature of its age, not as imitation, but as expansion. It translates those abstract European anxieties into a distinctly American and female experience. While Camus' hero faces the absurd on a sunlit Algerian beach, Plath's heroine faces it in a quiet suburban bedroom, surrounded by pastel curtains and good intentions. Both stand at the same abyss, but Esther's abyss is domestic, the emptiness between expectations. The existential current also explains why the novel resists neat closure. Readers often ask, does Esther get better? Does she relapse? The book doesn't answer. That's the point. Existence, for Plath, isn't a straight recovery arc. It's circular, rhythmic, unpredictable. The bell jar might lift, but it always hangs nearby. The question isn't whether it disappears, but how we live knowing it might fall again. Even the use of first-person narration deepens this philosophy. We only know what Esther knows. We see what she sees. There's no outside narrator to confirm her reality. Truth itself becomes subjective, wavering. In that sense, the bell jar prefigures postmodern ideas about fractured identity and unreliable voice. But Plath does it not to play games. She does it to capture what depression feels like from the inside, the self both witness and prisoner of its own mind. Some scholars read the novel as a dialogue with death, and they're right. But it's also a meditation on persistence, the simple act of staying. Plath's prose, even in its bleakest passages, carries a strange tenderness. She can describe madness and still find poetry in it. When she writes about Esther's time in the asylum, there's a quiet humanity behind the pain. The nurses, the smells, the muted routine, all of it becomes a small world where meaning flickers in gestures rather than grand answers. It's easy to forget how revolutionary that tone was in 1963. Mental illness had been portrayed before, but rarely from within, and never with such elegance. Plath gives depression a voice that's intelligent, ironic, even funny at times. Humor, in her hands, becomes philosophy, a way to stay conscious without collapsing. When Esther mocks the absurd rituals of society, she's not only being cynical, she's protecting herself from the void. By the time we reach the end, the philosophical question remains open. What does it mean to live when the world no longer offers meaning? Plath's answer is deceptively simple: to breathe, not heroically, not beautifully, just honestly, to wake up brush your teeth, and try again. In her journals, she wrote, "The greatest freedom is the freedom to choose life." That line could have been Esther's closing thought. So while the bell jar is often described as tragic, it's also strangely hopeful. It tells us that surviving one's own mind can be a form of philosophy, an act of radical presence. The novel's existential breath is not despair, but endurance. The rhythm slows, the sound fades to silence, and we're left with that heartbeat again. I am. And yet, for Plath, survival was never separate from language. Words were her way of claiming space in a world that refused to hear her. Every metaphor, every precise image, was a way to say, I exist, and my experience matters. Language as power. Sylvia Plath understood better than anyone that words can save a life, at least for a moment. In The Bell Jar, when everything else is stripped away from Esther Greenwood, ambition, confidence, control, what remains is language. The act of speaking, of narrating her own collapse, becomes her only defense against disappearance. In a world that tries to name her, diagnose her, and silence her, words are the last place she can still be free. Plath's prose is deceptively simple. The sentences flow with such clarity that it's easy to miss how deliberate every rhythm is. Her tone hovers between confession and observation, between poetry and reportage. The result is a voice that feels both intimate and detached, like someone whispering through glass. You can almost hear her balancing on the edge between control and surrender. Language, for Esther, becomes a territory of resistance. The psychiatrists who treat her speak in the cold vocabulary of diagnosis, neurosis, recovery, progress. Those words belong to authority, neat, impersonal, efficient. Esther counters them with her own vocabulary, images, metaphors, moments of sensory truth. Where the doctors record symptoms, she records sensations. She doesn't say, I was anxious. She says, the air lay thick with the smell of disinfectant. That precision is not just literary, it's survival. Every time Esther reclaims her own language, she regains a small measure of agency. That's why the first-person voice of the bell jar is so powerful. It refuses to let others narrate her life. She becomes the author of her own diagnosis, her own witness. The novel doesn't just describe madness, it performs the act of taking it back from the medical and moral authorities who have always spoken over women's experiences. Plath's use of irony sharpens this power. When Esther describes the rituals of the beauty industry, the dating world, or the hospital bureaucracy, her tone turns darkly comic. I decided I would put off the novel until I had gone to Europe and had a lover, she says early on, mocking the romantic cliches she's expected to live out. The humor is dry, but it's not cruelty, it's clarity. Through irony, she punctures the absurd performances of the 1950s and exposes the script beneath them. That balance of lyrical tenderness and intellectual bite is what makes Plath's style so distinct. The language never begs for sympathy, it demands understanding. Even at her most fragile, Esther's voice stays intelligent, observant, razor-sharp. This combination unsettled early readers, especially male critics, who were used to female characters being emotional but not analytical. One reviewer in 1963 dismissed the novel as a morbid curiosity. Another called it self-indulgent. Yet over time, readers recognized that this precision, this refusal to soften or apologize, was exactly what gave the bell jar its moral strength. Plath knew the risk of honesty. She wrote in her journals that she wanted to write so truthfully that it hurts. In the novel, that truth-telling takes the shape of rhythm. every phrase calibrated to sound both beautiful and unbearable. Her metaphors aren't ornaments, they're instruments. When she writes, the silence depressed me. It wasn't the silence of silence. It was my own silence. She transforms isolation into music. The power of language in the bell jar also lies in its ability to shape emotion without naming it. Plath doesn't describe feelings, she evokes them. When Esther begins to recover, we feel the shift not through plot but through tone. The sentences lengthen again. The air in the prose becomes breathable. Words, once heavy, begin to move lightly. The act of speaking, or writing, becomes a rehearsal for life. This connection between speech and survival has a personal echo. Plath herself often spoke of writing as both compulsion and therapy. Her poems, Lady Lazarus, Tulips, Edge, share the same precision that fuels the bell jar, a voice that can describe pain without being consumed by it. In that sense, the novel is a bridge between her poetic and personal selves, turning lived experience into crafted art. There's a small but important irony in how the bell jar ends. Esther steps into the room where doctors will decide if she's ready to leave the hospital. She doesn't tell us what they say. The story stops at the threshold. Some readers see this as unfinished. Others see it as liberation. I think Plath leaves that silence deliberately, a final assertion of control. For once, Esther doesn't have to explain herself. She gets the last word by not saying it. In this way, the bell jar becomes more than a novel. It becomes a conversation between language and silence, between control and surrender, between being spoken for and speaking back. Every reader who picks it up joins that conversation, hearing in Esther's voice the echo of their own unspoken sentences. And that's perhaps the truest form of literary power, not just the power to describe life, but the power to make us feel seen inside it. Language is the air that lifts the bell jar, even if only a little. And through her words, Plath teaches us that expression itself can be an act of defiance, a breath drawn in a world that too often tells you to hold it. We've now explored how the bell jar works from within, its structure, its social cage, its existential pulse, and its language. But no book lives only inside its pages. It travels, it changes, it provokes new conversations. So let's take one last step, out of the text and into our own world, to see why Plath's story still breathes in ours. The breath we share. When the bell jar first appeared, it was seen as dark, disturbing, even dangerous. Today, it feels prophetic. Sylvia Plath didn't just write about one woman's collapse. She wrote about a world that asks for perfection and then punishes the people who can't sustain the act. Esther Greenwood's voice still feels contemporary because the conditions she faced, the quiet pressure to be successful, beautiful, composed, have only changed their wardrobe. The bell jar may not be made of glass anymore. It glows from our screens. Modern readers often find in this novel a mirror they didn't expect. Some see their own struggle with mental health. Others recognize the exhaustion of performing a self for public approval. There's something haunting about realizing that a book written in the early 1960s can describe the emotional climate of the digital age so precisely. Esther's paralysis before the fig tree, infinite choices leading to inaction, feels like scrolling through endless possibilities online, unable to commit to any. The more freedom we have, the more fragile we feel. Plath's legacy is also personal. She gave language to things that had none, to depression, to alienation, to the contradictions of being both gifted and trapped. For decades, readers have whispered her lines like quiet prayers. I am, I am, huh? Each repetition is a heartbeat of recognition. Her words have helped countless people feel less alone, not because they promise healing, but because they honor the complexity of surviving. The enduring brilliance of the bell jar lies in its honesty. It doesn't romanticize despair, nor does it offer a cure. It stands still inside the uncertainty, refusing to decorate it or run from it. That courage, the willingness to look directly at what hurts, is what keeps the book alive. So, as we close this reflection, think of the bell jar not as a prison, but as a metaphor we all inhabit at some point. The pressure might come from work, from family, from the world's noise, or from our own minds. The question is not whether we can break it, but whether we can keep breathing inside it until the air returns. Perhaps that's why the bell jar continues to resonate. It's a story that asks us to listen, not to fix, to witness the quiet spaces in ourselves that long for understanding, and maybe to speak them out loud, to claim the small power of naming our own experience. Before we end, let me leave you with a thought. If the bell jar is still with us, invisible, humming above our lives, what would it take today for you to lift it? If this story has stirred something in you, remember to like this video, subscribe to Echoes of Books, and share your thoughts below. Tell me what the bell jar means to you, or how Sylvia Plath's words have touched your own story. Your voice adds to the conversation, and maybe, in some quiet way, it helps lift someone else's glass dome too.